Guten Abend, good evening, everyone. I decided to speak here because I think it's easier to work with my computer and with the screen. But thank you very much, Professor Neuneck, dear Götz. It's a great honor for me to be here. I'm a physicist from Argentina. I'm working together with Götz Neuneck and other colleagues in the Pugwash Conferences for Science and World Affairs. As I completely agree with your words in the sense that we really need to work together also with other institutions, with physicists, with scientists in these difficult moments, mainly that have to do with nuclear weapons, but also with other applications of science, and we really have to reflect on our responsibility as scientists. So I will take you through a quick history, mainly focusing on atomic bombs, because what I realized is that talking to many young people, they are not aware of the danger and of the enormous risk atomic bombs pose for humanity. So this is why I'm very happy that this Max-von-Laue-Lecture is dedicated to this topic. Again, it's a great honor being here. Coming back to Germany is a little bit like coming back home, because I did my postdoc at Max Planck's in Stuttgart and in Dresden in the early 90s. So it was just after the reunification of Germany, and we had a great time with our friends, and I really learned a lot from my German physics colleagues. So I want to say it's also an honor for me to give the Max-von-Laue lecture. Max von Laue, of course, I knew him because I teach solid-state physics, and so he won the Nobel Prize in 1914 for X-ray diffraction in crystals, and so he not only, with this experimental method, opened a new window to observe the hidden order of nature with observing crystals by X-ray diffraction, but he was also, as Professor Neuneck said, very active in human rights, and very active in restoring and building the scientific system and the scientific community in Germany. So this is my tribute to him as well, and again, it's an enormous honor to be here. I would like to start by explaining this experiment. This experiment, this is a painting of the first sustained and controlled nuclear fission reaction in Chicago. So the date is there. So this was done under the scientific leadership of Enrico Fermi on December the 2nd, 1942. This was in the middle of the city of Chicago in what is called the Stag Field. So it was a squash field, a squash room, and they built, when they decided after the discovery of nuclear fission by Lise Meitner, Otto Hahn, Frisch, Strassmann, a couple of years before this, Enrico Fermi had the conviction that he could control nuclear fission in the way I will briefly tell you now. So what they did is during 15 days, so you have to see that in a very short time, with the conviction they had, the funding, and the amount of young people constructing this, because they brought 45 tons of natural uranium, 400 tons, 45,000 bricks of pure graphite as moderator, and cadmium control rods. So what they did here, and you can see here in the picture, is that you have that dome, the Fermi pile, and I got to know only recently that pile does not mean battery, or pila in Spanish, but a pile is a heap. So this is a Fermi heap, the pile of fission material. And this experiment was done in the middle of the city, And I think Fermi was very confident that he could really control it, because what they did was they started, if you look at the experiment, this is the neutron intensity of the experiment as a function of time, and the time is a couple of hours in total. So what they did is they started taking out the control rods, putting them up, and you could see that nothing happened. And then, so there was no counting. When the control rods were removed, there was a slight increase in the neutron count, and then it leveled off. And leveling off meant that there was a local fission reaction, but it was not self-sustained. So they had to remove other control rods, and then they have a second leveling off here, and a third one, and then they change the scale. So it goes down because they change in scale. Then they went to lunch. They went to lunch for 2 hours, and when they came back, they said, now we will achieve the sustained reaction. And then here's where, after a couple of attempts, they saw this exponential increase in the neutron count, and this is where Fermi said, by calculating with his sliding ruler calculator, because he was calculating the exponent, it had to be exponential, and the exponent, of course, had to be larger than 1 in the count of neutrons. He said, we have achieved it. We have achieved control and self-sustained nuclear fission. So Compton was in charge of the experiment. He did a long-distance call to Harvard, and he said, the Italian navigator has landed in the New World. And the other physicist in Harvard, Conant, said, and how were the natives? Very friendly. So this is how it all started. And so after this, we have now 2 completely opposed worlds. The world where we have peaceful applications of nuclear energy, because this came after these experiments. Of course, we have nuclear energy, which is clean energy for the environment. We have medical applications in food, whatever. I mean, there's so many applications of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. And we also have the applications for war, which is the atomic bomb. And this is what I saw when I went to an APS meeting a year and a half ago. This is the Henry Moore's sculpture, and I think it's really beautiful, and I just want you to look at it for a moment and to reflect. I mean, this sculpture was built, This sculpture was built in 1967 for the 25th anniversary of the first controlled nuclear reaction, and this is on the site where the nuclear reaction was performed. And it really reminds you of the 2 contradicting worlds. So this looks like an atomic mushroom, like an atomic bomb, but here they are like pillars, and these pillars are like building maybe a nuclear reactor or building a civilization. So it's like the encounter of the 2 worlds, and I think it's really interesting. Although I see more of a nuclear mushroom, an atomic mushroom, than on the peaceful purposes in this sculpture. So this is how it all started. Then after that, a couple of years later, the Manhattan Project continued, and we have the Manhattan Project produced the first nuclear bomb, and the first nuclear test was done. It was called Trinity Test, and it was done in New Mexico in the USA on July 16, 1945, and it had a yield of 25 kilotons. And kilotons, that means 25 million kilograms of TNT equivalent. So it's not complete, the image there. But it's, so nowadays, this is a moderate-sized atomic bomb, and this is the first atomic test. Then, of course, only a few days later, on the 6th of August, we have the US, during the Second World War, the USA launched 2 nuclear weapons on two cities in Japan. One was on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. So this is really very few days later after the first Trinity test. This was a little boy. It was based on uranium-235, and it had a yield of only 15 kilotons, only 15, because all the other bombs are much bigger than that, and it caused 140,000 deaths. This is Hiroshima, how it was destroyed after that bomb. The other one was 3 days later on Nagasaki. It's very interesting to see how the decision was made to launch these bombs over Nagasaki. And it was a little bit bigger. It was a plutonium-239 bomb called Fat Man with 21 kilotons, just a bit bigger, that caused 80,000 deaths. And this is Nagasaki after the bomb. There were other, now after that, the atomic era began. Other countries, few of them, luckily, we're going to that now, mainly the Soviet Union started having their own nuclear program. The Pandora box was open, and there were many 2,500 nuclear devices. 2,500 devices were tested until 1996, where the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty was discussed. It's not yet in force, but until 1996, there were 2,500 tests. They produced nearly 700 megatons of energy, and the biggest of the U.S. was the U.S. Castle Bravo test in the Bikini Atoll, so very far from the U.S. In Marshall Islands on the 1st of March 1954, and it had a yield of 15 megatons. So this is 1,000 times bigger than the 15 kilotons of the bomb launched over Hiroshima. Then there were acute radiation symptoms of fishermen that were there, so there was a very unfortunate problem with some fishermen in the Lucky Dragon fishing boat. They were Japanese, and this is where the humanity started realizing that these tests produce a lot of acute radiation, which is not, of course, not good for the health. And then came the Tsar bomba. This is the biggest atomic bomb ever detonated, and this was the Soviet one. It was detonated in the Soviet Arctic, and it was called the Tsar bomba, or Big Ivan, and it had, in 1961, a yield of 58 megatons. So compared to the 15 megaton of the US one, this is about 4 times larger than the other bombs. So remember the numbers, this is 58 megatons, and this energy is a huge energy. It's 10 times the power of all bombs, civilian, non-nuclear bombs, detonated in World War II, including the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs. So with this energy, in this energy we have 10 times more than the energy released there. So this is a very brief sketch of the evolution of the number of atomic bombs we have in the world. We had in the world, so this is years. We start in 1945 and we end in 2023, 24. We have a big peak of 70,000 atomic bombs in the world, 70,000, around 1980, 83, 84. And after that, I mean, these are different treaties that were mainly decided and agreed upon between the US and the Soviet Union and then Russia. And now we have this number that is here, that I go back to that now. But the problem is that now this is slowly increasing. This is why we are so worried, because there is a change in the derivative of this curve. And we should really stop that, and because this is really something to be aware about. So this is a distribution of atomic warheads in each country. So United States has about 5,200. The UK 225, and it's increasing. France 290, Israel 90, Pakistan 170, same as India. Russia has 5,500. China about 600. China is increasing its nuclear weapons at quite a high speed, and it's because only a year ago it was about 500. and North Korea has detonated about 50 has about 50 bombs, but North Korea is the only one that tested after this, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. So the only nuclear tests we had were from Korea. Here are the numbers again, but I only wanted to emphasize that here in Europe, there are atomic weapons that are from the US. There are deployed in Belgium, 15. In Germany, there are 15. In Italy, 35, because there are 2 sites in Italy. Belarusia, Russia is claiming that there are some nuclear weapons in Belarusia, but there's no proof for that. The Netherlands has 15, and Turkey has about 20 nuclear weapons. So I have to read from here, because if not, so this is. This is the situation. I just wanted to start showing you these impressive images you can see anywhere, I'm sure you know about. But I want to lead you to reflect on some important issues. For example, some important actions done by some physicists. In July 1945, so when right after the Trinity test, or around in those days, there was a famous Frank report, and the Frank report was written by James Frank, Eugene Rabinovich, Leo Szilard, and others, and they wrote a report alerting President Truman about 3 things: about the impossibility of keeping the discovery of the chain reaction secret, about the likeliness of beginning a nuclear war arms race, and they were right, and 3, that the nuclear weapons should not be used in warfare, and they should only be used as deterrent or to show power. This report was dismissed and was never presented to President Truman, and so these scientists, the physicists, were very frustrated, and they created the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. It began with another name, and Oppenheimer was also involved in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, which is now a very prestigious journal, magazine with very interesting and articles about nuclear weapons in general, and the Bulletin is the one who sets the clock, the doomsday clock. We have never been so close to midnight, say the people of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, as now. We are 89 seconds to midnight. We were 90 last year, and we have never been so close. As another action of physicists was in 1944, in those days, when Joseph Rotblat, a Polish physicist who was working in the Manhattan Project, he resigned to the Manhattan Project. He was the only scientist to resign based on moral and ethical issues, because he said that when he realized, he knew, because he spoke to Leslie Groves, that the Manhattan Project already knew that Nazis were not able to build the atomic bomb, the Manhattan Project continued. It was not discontinued once they got to know that. So Joe Rotblat said, so there's no, it makes no sense to continue with this project. I don't want to continue. We should not have the atomic bomb. And so Joe Rotblat, I met him personally. He was very inspiring. He won the Nobel Peace Prize, as I show you in a while, and he was one of the creators of the Pugwash movement, for the Pugwash Conferences for Science and World Affairs. So we're talking about the 1950s. Other actions done by physicists, and this is it's very useful sometimes to look at history, because it can also be inspiring to see what we can do as physicists, because we are now stepping in the shoes of these giants, and we really have to take our responsibility for the times that we are here and for according to our expertise, but we really need to engage like these other eminent physicists did. For example, this is Bertrand Russell. He was not a physicist. He was a logistician, a mathematician, and he had the Nobel Prize in Literature. This was in 1955. It was right after the development of the H-bomb, which were the 2 biggest bombs I showed there. Those were fusion bombs, not fission bombs. So they got together with Albert Einstein, another physicist I'll show you now, and they wrote the Russell-Einstein Manifesto. The Russell-Einstein Manifesto is a beautiful piece of literature, very deep, very worrying, and it's a call to scientists to unite to discuss these issues. It was proclaimed on the 9th of July, 1955. So this year, we will commemorate the 70th anniversary of this Russell-Einstein Manifesto. And it was proclaimed in London. And the main points of the Russell-Einstein Manifesto are, it draws attention to the enormous danger posed by the development of nuclear weapons capable of destroying humanity. It urges governments and people to avoid war, to resolve conflicts, and to seek peaceful ways to do so, because it said that we cannot have war, because now we have these weapons that can destroy humanity. We must think in a new way. We must think of alternative ways to resolve our issues. It calls for a conference of scientists to discuss the dangers of nuclear weapons and take action. And it was Albert Einstein's last public act, because Albert Einstein signed this Russell-Einstein Manifesto in 1955. He signed it, but he died in April 1955, so he didn't even see the launching, the proclamation of the Russell-Einstein Manifesto. But it was his last public act, and I think this is very, very symbolic. As a result of this document, of this manifesto, the first meeting of scientists was held in the little town of Pugwash in Nova Scotia in Canada in 1957. And this was the creation of the Pugwash Conferences for Science and World Affairs. This is how they started. I'm reading and I forgot to pass, sorry. So this is Bertrand Russell and Albert Einstein, and one of the main messages is we must learn to think in a new way to solving our problems. Now, this Russell-Einstein Manifesto was signed by these eminent scientists, all men in those days. Most of them were Nobel laureates in science, except for Bertrand Russell, who was in literature. So then we have Bertrand Russell, we have Albert Einstein, who had received the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1921. Joseph Rotblat got the Nobel Prize for Peace later because of this manifesto and the Pugwash Conferences. Cecil Powell in Physics 1950, Linus Pauling, Max Born, Frédéric Joliot-Curie, Leopold Infeld. He didn't get a Nobel Prize, but he was a close friend and collaborator of Einstein's. Percy Bridgman, Hermann Müller, and Hideki Yukawa. So they are the signatories of the famous Russell-Einstein Manifesto. And this is the city of Pugwash. I promised Götz Neuneck to show this first lodge where the first meeting was held, and this is a photo for the 50th anniversary of that. So the Pugwash Conference is the main idea, the mission, is to foster the use of scientific rationale and scientific knowledge. Sorry, I'm looking here. I apologize. This is the Pugwash Lodge. So the mission of the Pugwash Conferences is to foster the use of scientific rationale and scientific knowledge to build trust and to discuss the threats to human security stemming from science and technology advancements, developments like nuclear weapons, other weapons of mass destruction, climate change, water scarcity, AI, pandemics, etc. It also promotes discussions and reflections on the beneficial applications of science, prevention of misuses, awareness and evaluation of non-intentional consequences of science and technology, ethical obligations of scientists. And the method is conferences, consultations, dialogue, but dialogue. So this is what we do in Pugwash, is we try to bring people together, we try to bridge different countries or groups or antagonists to try to discuss problems that are in the intersection of science and society, where scientists can bring not only their knowledge, but also the way of thinking. This is the main activity. So then, in 1995, the Pugwash Conferences were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize I wasn't in Pugwash yet. I wasn't so young then either. But so they got the 1995 Nobel Peace Prize, and here we have Joe Rotblat and Francesco Calogero. Francesco Calogero, I knew him before because he is a mathematical physicist, and I studied his model, the Calogero-Sutherland model. He has so many mathematical physics models which are very good for spin systems, etc. So I got to know him from the physics side. He was the Secretary General of Pugwash when they got the Nobel Prize, and this is a photo in Oslo in 1995, and the Nobel Peace Prize was given to them for their efforts towards diminishing the role of nuclear weapons in international affairs and in the long run in eliminating such weapons. So we're still far from the elimination of those weapons, and now they're gaining every time much more salience and importance in international affairs. So we are moving away from this Nobel Peace Prize. Now, the actions of Pugwash. Pugwash was and is involved in many. I just want to list some topics. I won't go into details, but for example, in nuclear disarmament issues and non-proliferation, there were many meetings putting people together, not only scientists, but policymakers, politicians, the military, and other organizations to discuss, for example, important treaties like the Partial Test Ban Treaty, the PTBT. So it was to prohibit testing except for underground testing. The Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT. These are many acronyms, but they're very important treaties that held, that at least gave some order, legal international order to the problem of nuclear weapons. The SALT, the START, the anti-ballistic missile, the conventional forces in Europe, the intermediate range nuclear forces, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. So I'm reading there. It was also a very important, Pugwash, to bring people together to discuss the possibility of, some people came up with the idea of having nuclear weapon-free zones. This is a creativeness of politicians and of scientists working together. Let's have nuclear weapons-free zones. And there are 4 or 5 nuclear weapons-free zones in the world. Mostly the southern hemisphere and a little bit in Kazakhstan and Mongolia. This was important also discussions in Pugwash. I remember the Tlatelolco Treaty because it's all Latin America as a whole region that is nuclear weapon free. Meetings on the chemical and biological weapons, discussions on science and society, ethics in science, climate change. Also, peace, confidence building, and regional security in all these regions. Pugwash was involved in discussions during the Vietnam War. There are interesting books I'm adding at the end of this talk and reviews of what Pugwash and other colleagues did in these regions. So the Middle East, Iran, the Korean Peninsula, etc. And now, so now we have a couple of working groups on emerging technologies, AI, quantum technologies. We have a working group on nuclear weapons. We have a group on chemical and biological weapons. And we're also discussing some topics on the Middle East, etc. So this is what we do in Pugwash. Now, Pugwash, I want to mention what is science diplomacy. I'm sure most of you, because it is a word that is already well-known, science diplomacy. This concept did not exist until the 2000s, approximately. Maybe it started to develop there. But Pugwash was, I think, one of the first, or the first group of scientists that brought this concept without that name. But the activities, what science diplomats do. So I'm a scientist, a physicist, but I consider myself a science diplomat because I'm doing this. What is science diplomacy? Science diplomacy has 3 main, very interesting way of describing it. Is science in diplomacy, science for diplomacy, and diplomacy for science. Science in diplomacy, it is what scientists do to provide advice and to support foreign policy objectives. For example, technical aspects in verification, safeguards, dismantlement, of nuclear weapons, effect of nuclear weapons. In the session at the DPG, we had very interesting discussions, for example, on all these, what scientists can do technically to help to bring their expertise to design all these issues, for example. Now, science for diplomacy is scientific cooperation can improve the understanding and confidence building between people, between different nations. For example, the CERN. CERN is so many people from all different countries. The ICTP, the International Center for Theoretical Physics from Argentina, my first trip abroad was to Italy, and there I met scientists from the north of Africa, from Asia, from India. I met scientists from Europe, from the US, from Russia, and I love the atmosphere, the international atmosphere there. So this is science for diplomacy. The Sesame is also the synchrotron in Jordan, where people get together of many countries in the Middle East, also Israelis, Palestinians. The situation now, of course, is not easy, but you have all the Middle Eastern scientists getting together to work in that experiment. And last is diplomacy for science, which is diplomacy can facilitate the interaction between scientists in different parts of the world. So now, very briefly, I want to just mention what scientists, physicists in Argentina and Brazil did, because I think it's exemplary, and it's something that is mentioned in various fora on how the physical societies of Argentina and Brazil got together, and they were instrumental in bringing in a final agreement, which is called the ABAC, the Argentina-Brazil Agreement for Accountability and Control. So Argentina and Brazil, they have nuclear installations, nuclear power plants for peaceful uses, and they also have nuclear medicine, etc. And in spite of having signed and ratified the NPT, the Tlatelolco Treaty of a nuclear weapon-free zone in Latin America, nothing is redundant, because they also agreed to have mutual agreement and control. So this adds to the other compromises and at the international level. So, I mean, this is just an example that just an example that in 1983 and 88, the physical societies of Brazil and Argentina, they got together, and they got the APS Burton Award for peaceful, because they raised the issue of joint nuclear accounting and inspection agreements, what I was saying, between Argentina and Brazil. And in 1988, they had a joint statement saying that the Brazilian Association of Physics and the Argentine Physics Association reiterates their joint position against nuclear programs with military purposes and to any development of nuclear weapons in both countries, agreeing that their nuclear programs must be based on a strict civil control, generating the mechanisms to effectively guaranteeing its peaceful objectives. And this led to the ABAC, because it's a quadripartite agreement between Argentina, Brazil, the ABAC, and the IAEA. So physicists, we can do things. We can influence policy, not only with our knowledge, but also, as I say, with our way of thinking. This is, in Spanish, the agreement between the Brazilian and Argentina societies. And this is important because the Brazilian, la Sociedad Brasileira de Física, the Brazilian Physical Society, they were important in bringing into the Brazilian Constitution, Article 21, Brazilian Constitution of the nation, Article 21, which says, all nuclear activity in national territory will be used for peaceful purposes exclusively and under approval of the National Congress. This is beautiful. We should have this in Argentina too. Constitutions of countries that have signed the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons should also try to bring this into their constitution. It's a compromise for using nuclear energy with peaceful purposes. The Argentine Physical Society, and I was very active to try to get this, we have one article in the Code of Ethics which says that any conscious participation in the development, improvement, and fabrication of weapons of indiscriminate destruction, such as nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons, among others, are considered a breach to the basic ethical principles. So this is here since 2003 in our Code of Ethics of the Argentine Physical Society. So what happens with science diplomacy, and this is already going towards the end of my talk, now trying to think about the future, which is the current situation. We have a multipolar world, which makes it more complicated politically. Globalization and the commitment to global interdependence and cooperation on global science issues are in retreat. So we have a fractionalized world. Open science is also being replaced by as open as possible, but as closed as necessary. Think of collaboration in quantum technologies, in AI, in biology, etc. So it's restrictions. There are many more restrictions now to scientific exchange. This is not good. Also with the proliferation of technology, the interface between science, technology, economics, and national security is much larger. Science has penetrated society. And proliferation of misinformation and reduction of reliance in science by the public opinion. I mean, the debates we had during the COVID pandemic. I don't think we came out better from the COVID pandemic with respect to the trust by the general public. So we really have to work hard on that, on bringing back public confidence in science. Requirements, what do we need then to be effective? How can we push a better implementation of science diplomacy? We have global problems. Climate change is global, biodiversity loss, pandemic risks, many other existential threats require that we work in an interdisciplinary way and we reach collective action. New technologies cross national borders. Like digital technologies, AI, large language models, synthetic biology, the use of space, extraterrestrial resources, nuclear weapons. It's not only of one country. I mean, all these technologies. Quantum technologies with security and defense applications, they require globalized actions. We cannot separate the world in countries. We have to work together. There is a huge technology gap, and now I'm talking about someone from the global south, from Argentina. Why is it important? Because the technologies now, advanced technologies, require large investments and specialized training and a highly mature technological environment. So there should be a responsible action from governments and from overarching institutions to ensure inclusive, equitable, and global development of these technologies to meet the SDGs. The SDGs are the development goals of the UN and face collective and global actions. So all this, we have to have now an umbrella, not a nuclear umbrella, but a reflective umbrella, which is integrity in science. And integrity in science has to do with our responsibility. So what can we learn from all these good examples I have given you of pacifist or activist scientists and physicists in the past? They have spoken to power, spoken truth to power. They have tried, in the Frank Report, they have tried to reach President Truman with what they thought was going to happen with nuclear weapons. And they were right, but the politicians did not listen to the scientists. I don't say we're always right, but we should be able to at least transmit what we see from the scientific part. We are prepared. We have a training, so we should speak the truth of what we know to politicians and to the public. We should reflect on what we're working on and to consider the consequences of our work. We have to be active in reacting to matters that concern us. We should react when we see things that are not right. We should speak out, particularly when issues threaten the social well-being. And this is just to show you we have a Hippocratic Oath in my Balseiro Institute, which is an atomic center in the south of Argentina. And it's based on the International Student Young Pugwash. We have a young chapter in Pugwash, and they developed this Hippocratic Oath for scientists, and we use it, physicists. I didn't use it because I finished before it was implemented, because I implemented it when I was already a professional. And it reads, I swear to work for a better world in which science and technology are used in social responsible ways. I will not use my education for any purpose aimed at harming human beings or the environment, and before acting, I will consider the ethical implications of my work. I take this oath because I accept that individual responsibility is the first step on the path to peace. Isn't that beautiful? And this was elaborated by young physicists, some years ago. Again, I forgot to pass it. So, to finish, no, I was missing something. Well, I think there was, yes, okay. So let's go back to the Russell-Einstein Manifesto. The Russell-Einstein Manifesto says, now reading it, is beautifully how it finishes, and just to inspire ourselves, the following. There lies before us, if we choose, continual progress in happiness, knowledge, and wisdom. Shall we instead choose death because we cannot forget our quarrels? We appeal as human beings to human beings. Remember your humanity and forget the rest. If you can do so, the way lies open to a new paradise. If you cannot, there lies before you the risk of universal death. These are very true words, very inspiring, but very terrorizing. And this was written in 1955, and the Russell-Einstein Manifesto is as valid, or even more valid today than what it was in 1955. So, to finish, we started like this. I started with terrifying images of the Tsar bomber, this powerful weapon of terror, but we should do something about it. We should be able to get rid of these weapons, to reach a way of coexistence in our small world, where we do not need these weapons of terror pending on us and threatening to destroy all kinds of life and environment. So we should finish up remembering our humanity, going back to the words of the Russell-Einstein Manifesto. We should change to this blue sky world where, above all, we remember our humanity. So I hope we can work together for a better future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Karen, for your inspiring talk. I think it brought back real hard global existential problems, but also the hope and at least some methods and instruments how the doom can be overcome. Thank you very much for this. I think we still have maybe 10 minutes for questions to deepen some views, or to ask whether you wanted to come in contact with Pugwash, or you missed some things. There's a microphone coming to you.
Thanks. Thank you very much for the presentation. What would you say are actions that we can take as individuals, especially young scientists, to play a role in that?
As individuals, well, there's a lot to do, because all our history is done by individuals. Also, those people who are building the bombs are individuals who are doing something. But I think what I've tried to do during my life, speak out, speak to our colleagues, depending if you're a physicist or not. The problem now, for example, is that the situation, we do not have as much, we don't have 70,000 nuclear weapons. We have a total of 12,000 around. which is much less. Wow, how good. It's not a question of numbers, like Frank von Hippel said today. It's not a question of numbers. Because if the world can be destroyed 10 times or 2 times, who cares? And in the 1980s, here in Bonn, there were millions of people at the, here, what's the name of the?
Hofgarten.
At the Hofgarten, demonstrating, and also in New York, in other cities in Europe, in Japan, and we have lost that sense of reaction. Young people are really mobilizing for climate change, which I think is great, but we have to also add the threat of nuclear weapons. It's not an imaginative threat. So I think civilian mobilization is very important, and it should come back. This is very important because people are not realizing that we're really living through a moment which is much more dangerous than in those times, because we have more countries, 9 countries that have nuclear weapons. Before there were 5. I mean, now we have 9. The treaties are crumbling because the states are not abiding by the treaties, and they are getting away from the treaties. If you look at what's happening in the U.S., in Russia, etc. In addition to that, there is no public awareness. So I think this is an explosive mixture of lack of awareness, which we have to overcome.
Okay, thanks.
More questions here? I'll give you my microphone. It keeps me young.
Yeah, thanks a lot for this great talk. I have 2 questions, actually. I found it very intriguing to learn more about South America. And so that there is these, also these efforts to connect to the message of Pugwash and to connect to atomic protest, etc. I was just wondering, since you have this experience of military dictatorships, and all these quotes you showed us are from the period thereafter. So is this experience of a military dictatorship something which gives us a special impact to those physicists, scientists in South America to engage into, say, these kinds of discussions about how to do things like science diplomacy, etc. This is more the question about an area of this history I don't know at all. My other question is more, since it's an anniversary, 70 years of Russell-Einstein Manifesto. Don't you think that historians by now mostly agree that from the side of impact, that was the least successful form of protest? It was a very, say, basic statement in black and white, and you ended your talk with atomic bomb or nice nature and blue sky. That's a little bit, well, very simplistic. And from what I know, at least from the German atomic protest development, and the Göttingen 18, and the Mainau thing, and what Hans-Peter Dürr was doing, etc. So, and also connecting to Pugwash clearly. So, but these were, say, at least historians now tend to say, these were more effective forms to really engage science in this. So I wonder, what's the message of Einstein-Russell today?
There is still something, I mean, the Russell-Einstein Manifesto, I think it was a good way of approaching, so an alternative way. What was much more effective in those days, and I agree with you, is the action of other individual scientists, but mainly the population. This is when governments realized that there was a fear in the population, that they did not want nuclear weapons. Now, but what I rescue from that is that I still believe that we need much more science in decision making, and this is one of the things. First, that really we have to stop thinking of resolving our issues by war. Of course, this is very idealistic, but it's something we really have to talk about. But the second is bringing science to decision making And this science diplomacy, I mean, in that sense, it was very relevant, the Pugwash movement, because it started with science diplomacy. And I see that the science and decision-making now is going in the wrong direction. We need much more of that. The International Parliamentarian Union had created a science and technology office. But now if you look at different states, what is happening in the US, what is happening in Argentina or in other countries, they're moving away from science advice. And this is something we really have to bring back, and I see it as a danger. And this is, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but you asked me what to rescue from the Russell-Einstein Manifesto. And I think, and I'm worried about the lack of scientific advice. But not only scientific advice, also of scientific reasoning, not to be more rational, more logical, to be honest intellectually, to be able to talk in an open way, and to have also the big problem we have with misinformation now, with the avalanche of information, is how to create a critical thinking. And we must engage in critical thinking and educating our young people much more with critical. All that, I think, is a result of the spirit of the enlightenment of the Russell-Einstein Manifesto. But I forgot your first question. Just tell me the
South American situation, whether we went through this military dictatorships.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, these military dictatorships were a disaster for, in the last century we had several in Argentina and in the whole region, and they were a disaster for our countries, and well, we can talk about that, but now what does it have to, it's bad because we lose the possibility of engaging in discussions, we lose the exercise of democracy, and this is taking a long while to rebuild. So what does it have to do with nuclear weapons? Well, it's debatable. Argentina and Brazil, they always wanted to develop the nuclear weapons program for peaceful purposes. There was some events, but luckily this does not prosper. But now we're over that. At least there is a firm commitment not to do it. But this commitment is not, we don't have to give it for granted, because in any moment, some extremist or extremist government can say, if there is a proliferation, which is likely, I mean, if we continue in this path of atomization or fractionalization, there will be new atomic testing, there will be proliferation of new states, and then I don't know what's going to happen. So that's why it's so important to have these discussions for people to know what it is about, and not to just say we want more power, we want more nuclear weapons. We need to reach the civil society and governments.
I have a question, if I ask, if I may. Hi.
Okay.
Thanks for your talk. So my question is not so much on nuclear weapons, but maybe on the general weaponization of technology. So as scientists, we often develop technology in a continuous way and not in a stepwise way, right? So these technologies might be helpful for the civilian, for civility, but also for military applications. So how do we, is there a qualitative description of what kind of technology development is okay to do, and what are maybe boundaries that we should try to keep?
Yes, this is a very important question. You're mentioning the possibility of dual uses of scientific developments. So, one thing is what we have in the Argentine Physical Society Code of Ethics. Any conscious participation we see as a breach in ethical principles. So, of course, if you're doing research if you're researching quantum spin chains, you never know what's going to happen with that because you're studying basic science. However, it could have eventually an application, but you were not aware of that. If you were involved in developing nuclear weapons, of course, I mean, we wouldn't have nuclear weapons if we didn't have physicists and engineers working in that. But I see as an example Joe Rothbard, because Joe Rothbard said, I don't want to use my knowledge to build this weapon. So now I see the two different things. One is weapons of mass destruction, and then you have the whole set of military developments that has to do with security of nations, and one can have different ideas on how to, even for police forces, etc. I mean, but this is a whole other area of conventional forces. But nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction, of which nuclear weapons are the worst because they're not even comparable to chemical and biological weapons, this is a different story, and we shouldn't have scientists working in that area because they're designed to destroy civilian population indiscriminately.
Thanks.
Okay, more questions? I don't see any more hands up. In that case, I thank again Karen Hallberg for giving us insight.